Welcome. Tonight's story is about Jari Litmanen, a quiet football mind from Finland, and one of the greatest players in the history of Ajax. Known for his intelligence, his calm movement, and the way he seemed to understand the game a moment before everyone else. But this story does not begin in the great stadiums of Europe. It begins in Finland, in a quiet city surrounded by lakes and forests. Now you can rest. There is nothing you need to do tonight. Just listen. His story begins in Finland, in a mid-sized city surrounded by lakes and forests, in a family where football was already part of the air. Let that be the beginning. A name, a country, a family, and the slow unfolding of a life in football. Finland is a country in northern Europe, bordering Sweden to the west, Norway to the north, and Russia to the east. Its landscape is defined by water and forest. There are tens of thousands of lakes spread across the interior of the country, connected by rivers and surrounded by pine and birch trees. The winters are long and cold and dark. The snow arrives early and stays late. But the summers, when they come, are bright and extended, with daylight stretching late into the evening in the northern latitudes. Lahti is a city in southern Finland, roughly 100 kilometers north of Helsinki. It sits at the southern end of Lake Vesijärvi, and the surrounding landscape is typical of the Finnish interior: water and trees and gentle hills. The city is not enormous, with a population of around 100,000 people, but it is a real city with its own industries, its own culture, its own rhythms. Jari Litmanen was born on February 20th, 1971, in Lahti. He grew up in a household where football was not just a background activity, but a genuine presence. His father, Olavi Litmanen, had been a footballer himself, playing in the Finnish football pyramid. Growing up with a father who had played the game professionally, at least at the domestic level, meant that Jari was surrounded by football from the very beginning. It was talked about at home. It was practiced in the garden and on the local fields. It was the natural centre of his early sporting life. Finland is not a country traditionally associated with football in the way that Brazil or Argentina or the Netherlands are. The climate makes year-round outdoor football impossible. The domestic league is modest by European standards, and for most of the 20th century, Finnish footballers did not make significant impressions on the major European competitions. The country's sporting culture leaned more toward winter sports, cross-country skiing, ice hockey, athletics. Football was present but not dominant. Growing up as a football-loving child in Finland in the 1970s and early 1980s meant growing up aware of the game's limitations in your own country, while also being aware of what it looked like at its best, through the players and clubs that appeared on television during major tournaments and European club competitions. The gap between Finnish domestic football and the top of the European game was wide and obvious. That gap did not discourage Jari Litmanen. It gave him something to aim for. The football fields of Lahti in winter are covered in snow for months. Training in those conditions requires a different kind of preparation and a different kind of mentality. Young players in Finland who want to develop through the winter month find ways to practice indoors, in sports halls, on small artificial surfaces, keeping the touch and the movement alive, even when the outdoor pitches are frozen. This is simply the reality of Finnish football. You learn to work with the conditions you have. Litmanen played for Rapus Lahti as a young player. Rapus was one of the main football clubs in the city, and it was the natural environment for a talented young footballer from Lahti to develop. The club had a history in Finnish football, having been one of the more successful clubs in the country in earlier decades. By the time Litmanen was coming through the youth system, Reipas offered a serious football environment within the context of Finnish domestic football. His early development showed the qualities that would define him throughout his career. He was technically gifted, comfortable on the ball in tight spaces, with a sense of where he needed to be on the pitch that was already evident even in his youth years. He was not the most physically imposing player. He was not someone who dominated through power or pace. He was someone who thought quickly and moved intelligently, who found the ball and used it well. In Finnish football at the youth level, a player with Litmanen's technical quality stood out clearly. The standard of the competition he was developing against was not yet the European standard he would eventually reach, but it was real competition, and performing consistently well within it built the foundation of confidence and habit that a young player needs. He progressed through the Reipas Lahti system into the senior team, making his appearances in the Finnish domestic league. The Veikkausliiga, Finland's top division, operates during the summer months, from spring through autumn, to avoid the worst of the winter weather. The matches are played on grass that is green and firm in the long Finnish summer, under skies that stay light late into the evening. For Litmanen as a young senior professional, the Finnish league was the natural starting point. But it was a starting point, not a destination. His qualities were already suggesting that his eventual level would be significantly higher than the domestic Finnish game. The question was not really whether he would eventually move to a bigger league, but when. Helsinki is the capital of Finland, the largest city in the country, located on a peninsula on the southern coast. It faces the Baltic Sea, and in winter, the sea can freeze solid, the ice extending out toward the horizon. HJK Helsinki, the dominant club in Finnish football, was the next step for Litmanen's development. He joined HJK Helsinki in the early 1990s. HJK were Finland's most successful club, regularly competing in European qualification and representing Finnish football in the early rounds of UEFA competition. The club's environment was more professional and more competitive than anything available in Lahti, and moving there allowed Litmanen to continue developing at the highest level Finnish football offered. His performances for HJK confirmed the impression that had been building for some time. He was genuinely talented at a level that exceeded what the Finnish domestic game could fully contain. The scouts and coaches who watched Finnish football with European eyes, looking for players who might function at the next level, could see it clearly. Litmanen was ready for a bigger stage. After HJK, he spent a short period at Maipa in 1992. It was a brief step, but it kept him playing and visible at the right time. And soon after, the move to Ajax became real. Ajax is one of the great clubs in the history of European football. Based in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, the club had built a reputation over decades for developing technically gifted players and playing an intelligent, possession-based style of football. Their youth academy, De Toekomst, was considered one of the finest in the world. Players who came through the Ajax system, or who joined the club at the senior level, absorbed a particular philosophy of how the game should be played. The Ajax of the early 1990s was in a transitional period. The club had won multiple Dutch league titles and had a history of Champions Cup success. But the specific era of dominance that would define the mid-1990s was still being assembled. The coach who would shape that period was Louis van Gaal, who took charge of the first team in 1991. Litmanen joined Ajax in 1992. He was 21 years old. He was moving from the Finnish domestic league to one of the most technically demanding club environments in European football. The gap in quality was significant. The pace of Ajax training, the technical standards expected in every session, the tactical complexity of what Van Gaal was building. All of this would have been a considerable step up from what Litmanen had experienced in Finland. Amsterdam is a city built on water. The canals run through the older parts of the city in a series of concentric rings, and the streets alongside them are lined with the narrow, tall brick houses that define the city's visual character. In autumn and winter, the light in Amsterdam is grey and diffuse, coming through clouds that move steadily in from the North Sea. The city has a particular atmosphere at these times. Quiet in the mornings, the canals reflecting the pale sky, the bicycles moving through the streets without hurry. For a young man from Lahti arriving in this environment, the cultural adjustment would have been real. A different language, a different rhythm of daily life, different expectations in training and in competition. But the adjustment to Dutch football, and to the Ajax environment specifically, was also one that Litmanen navigated with patience and purpose. His early period at Ajax was one of settling in and demonstrating his qualities in a new environment. Van Gaal was a demanding coach, methodical in his approach, with clear ideas about how he wanted his teams to play and what he expected from each player in each position. The role he envisioned for Litmanen was in the attacking midfield area, the number 10 position, the player who connected midfield and attack, who received the ball between the lines and created from that space. This was the role that suited Litmanen's qualities most naturally. His technical ability allowed him to receive the ball under pressure and keep it. His vision allowed him to see the passes and the movements that others did not. His intelligence allowed him to be in the right positions at the right times, so that when the ball arrived, he had already created the conditions to use it well. The Ajax squad during this period was one of genuine quality throughout. Players like Frank Rijkaard, and later the generation that would define the mid-1990s, including Edgar Davids, Clarence Seedorf, Patrick Kluivert, Michael Reiziger, and others, formed a collective that was exceptional. Danny Blind and Frank de Boer provided organisation and experience. Mark Overmars brought pace and directness. In this company, Litmanen had to earn his place and hold it through consistent performance. He did both. His integration into the Ajax system over the first seasons established him as a genuine and important part of the team. He scored regularly, created chances for teammates, and functioned within Van Gaal's system with increasing confidence and quality. The Finnish player, who had arrived from a modest domestic league, was becoming one of the important figures in one of the most respected club setups in European football. Picture the Ajax training ground in the early 1990s. The Dutch sky above, usually carrying clouds. The light soft and even. The pitch well maintained, the grass green against the grey of the autumn air. Players moving through the organised patterns of Van Gaal's training sessions, precise and purposeful, the technical demands evident in every drill. Litmanen working within this environment, absorbing the philosophy, refining the habits that Van Gaal's system required. The early mornings, the repetition of technical exercises, the tactical sessions where the shape of the team was discussed and practiced. This was the daily texture of life at Ajax, the invisible work that built toward what became visible on match days. The Dutch Eredivisie, the top division of Dutch football, is a league with real quality at its upper end, but a gap between the best clubs and the rest that is perhaps wider than in some other major European leagues. Ajax, along with PSV Eindhoven and Feyenoord, operated at a consistently high level, while many other clubs were less competitive. This meant that Ajax won the Eredivisie regularly during the Van Gaal years. But the true test of what the team was building came in European competition. Ajax began to make serious progress in the UEFA Champions League as Van Gaal's team matured. and the squad reached the peak of its development. The team that assembled by the mid-1990s had a balance of youth and experience, of technical quality and competitive drive that was genuinely rare. The 1994-95 Champions League season was the culmination of everything Ajax had been building. The team moved through the competition with a quality that was widely recognized as exceptional. They played with a clarity of purpose and a technical standard that set them apart from most of their opponents. Litmanen was central to what Ajax did that season. He operated as the primary creative force in the attacking area, the player who made the team's most dangerous moments happen through his vision and his technical quality. He scored important goals across the campaign. He created chances for others. He was the connection between the work done deeper in midfield and the finishing of the forwards. The final was played in Vienna against AC Milan. Ajax won the match with a goal from Patrick Kluivert. It was a significant result, Ajax defeating one of the most celebrated clubs in European football history to win the Champions League. For Litmanen, being part of that achievement was the highest point yet in a career that had already travelled a long way from Lahti and Rapus. The Champions League trophy is one of the most recognised objects in European sport. Winning it means you have been the best club team in Europe in a given season, across the most competitive club competition on the continent. For a player from Finland, where the domestic league was modest and the country's football history was limited, reaching this point was extraordinary. He was one of the standout players of that Champions League campaign, central to how Ajax played and created chances. This recognition reflected the assessment of those who had watched the competition closely, that he had been among the most influential players of that European campaign. It was an individual acknowledgement within the context of what had been a collective achievement. The years following the 1995 Champions League victory were ones of sustained quality for Litmanen and for Ajax. The team continued to compete at the top of Dutch football and remained competitive in Europe, though they did not repeat the Champions League victory. The squad that had won in Vienna began to evolve as players moved to clubs in larger leagues, attracted by the talent that had been visible in that campaign. Litmanen remained at Ajax through these years, continuing to perform at a high level and continuing to be one of the defining players of the team. His consistency was a feature of his career from the very beginning, the ability to perform well, not just in the important matches, but across the full course of a season, week after week, in the league and in Europe. His time at Ajax also included another deep run in the Champions League. In the 1994-95 season's follow-up, Ajax reached the final again in 1995-96, where they lost to Juventus on penalties. Litmanen was part of that campaign as well, another demonstration that the team he was part of was genuinely among the best in Europe, even when the ultimate prize was not secured. The De Meer Stadion, and then the Amsterdam Arena, which opened in 1996, were the grounds where Ajax played their home matches during this period. The arena was a modern stadium with a retractable roof, designed to function in the variable Dutch weather, while providing the atmosphere of a serious European football venue. Playing there, under the roof closed against the rain, or open on clear summer evenings, was part of the regular texture of Litmanen's working life during his Ajax years. Finland's national team was another constant in Litmanen's professional life throughout his career. He represented Finland from the early stages of his senior career and went on to become the most important player the national team had produced. He wore the captain's armband for many years, leading a national side that was modest in terms of its European and world ranking, but that competed with consistency and commitment in qualifying campaigns. Finland had not historically been a force in international football. The country had never qualified for a major tournament, neither a World Cup nor a European Championship, during the decades of Litmanen's career. This meant that his career at international level was defined not by the experience of major tournament football, but by the sustained work of qualifying campaigns, the matches played across Europe against a wide range of opponents, always with the possibility of qualification in view, but the reality of it remaining out of reach. This is a particular kind of football life, to be the most talented player in a national team that cannot quite reach the tournaments where the most talented players go to be seen by the widest audiences. To give the same commitment and the same quality in a qualifying match in Scandinavia as you would in a Champions League final. Knowing that the stakes and the visibility are profoundly different, Litmanen did this consistently across many years and many campaigns. His presence in the Finland team was important beyond his individual quality. He was the player around whom the team's best performances were organized. When he was fit and available, Finland were better than when he was not. That kind of individual influence on a modest national team is perhaps the clearest indication of genuine quality. You can see what a player provides most clearly when you remove them and observe the difference. The Eredivisie, evenings in Amsterdam, under the lights of the Arena, with its roof sometimes open and sometimes closed against the autumn weather. The familiar pattern of the Ajax build-up play, the ball moving through the midfield with purpose and precision. Litmanen in his area of the pitch, moving quietly into space, finding angles, receiving the ball, and using it with the clarity that came from years of work and natural intelligence. This was the sustained reality of his best years. Not every match was a Champions League final. Most matches were Eredivisie fixtures against the range of Dutch clubs, some of which were genuinely competitive, and some of which were not. The quality of performance across all of these, not just the high-profile occasions, was what defined Litmanen's reputation within football. Coaches and teammates who worked with him during the Ajax years spoke consistently about his technical quality and his intelligence on the pitch. His ability to receive the ball in difficult positions and find solutions. His timing of movement, arriving in the right place at the right moment, rather than running aimlessly and hoping the ball would find him. His passing accuracy, particularly in the spaces between defensive lines where the margins were small. These qualities were not accidental. They were the product of years of practice and of a natural aptitude for the game that had been present from childhood and refined through every stage of his career. By the late 1990s, Litmanen's contract at Ajax was approaching a situation that led to a significant decision. Barcelona, the great Spanish club, made a move for him. This was a transfer that reflected the esteem in which he was held across European football. Barcelona were one of the biggest clubs in the world, competing regularly for La Liga and for the Champions League. Their interest in Litmanen was a recognition of his quality and of what he might bring to their squad. The transfer to Barcelona happened in 1999. He was joining a club under Louis van Gaal, the same coach who had managed him at Ajax. Van Gaal had taken the Barcelona job after leaving Ajax, and his knowledge of Litmanen's qualities was presumably part of the reason for the transfer. Barcelona is a city on the northeastern coast of Spain, facing the Mediterranean Sea. The climate is warm and mild, the light Mediterranean and clear. The pace of life different from Amsterdam in ways that are immediately noticeable. The Camp Nou, Barcelona's stadium, is the largest club football ground in Europe, with a capacity for nearly 100,000 spectators. Playing there, in front of those crowds, in the context of Spanish football and the Champions League, was a different scale of experience from anything available in the Dutch league. The Barcelona squad at that time contained significant quality. There were players of the highest caliber throughout the squad, and the expectations at the club were correspondingly high. La Liga was a competitive and demanding league, and Barcelona's supporters and management expected performances and results that matched the club's status. Litmanen's time at Barcelona was difficult in ways that were largely outside his control. Injuries interrupted his involvement significantly. He was unable to play with the regularity that would have allowed him to establish himself in the squad and demonstrate his qualities over a sustained period. The injury problems meant that he appeared far less often than either he or the club had hoped when the transfer was made. This is one of the frustrating realities of football careers. A move to a great club at the right moment in a career, with a coach who knows your qualities and wants to use them, can still be undermined by the physical fragility that professional sport sometimes imposes. Litmanen did not play poorly at Barcelona. He largely did not play enough to be properly judged at all. The time in Spain was a period of recovery and waiting as much as it was a period of football, rehabilitation work, careful return to training, the gradual process of getting back to full fitness, and then trying to find a place in a competitive squad. For a player of his quality, accustomed to being central to the teams he played for, this was a different and more difficult experience. Van Gaal's time at Barcelona also came to an end during this period, which removed the coach who had brought Litmanen to the club. Transitions in coaching always affect players differently. A new coach brings different priorities and different ideas about which players are central to his plans. Liverpool offered the next chapter. Gerard Houllier, the Liverpool manager, brought Litmanen to Anfield in January 2001. Liverpool were in a strong period at that time, and the 2001 season in particular was one of their most successful in many years. They won the FA Cup, the League Cup, and the UEFA Cup in the same season, a remarkable treble that brought the club significant success. Litmanen arrived in January 2001 and was part of the squad for the second half of that season. Anfield, Liverpool's home ground in the Anfield area of the city, is one of the most famous football stadiums in England. It holds around 45,000 spectators and has an atmosphere on match days, particularly European nights, that is specific to that ground and that city. Liverpool as a city sits on the northwestern coast of England, on the Mersey estuary. It is an old port city with its own strong culture and identity. The football club is woven into the fabric of the city in ways that go beyond sport. Supporting Liverpool is part of the identity of a significant portion of the city's population. Litmanen's contribution to Liverpool during the cup-winning season was meaningful, but limited by his availability. He was not always fit and was not always in the starting 11, but he brought quality when he was involved. The technical ability and the intelligent movement that had defined his career at Ajax and that remained present even after the difficult years in Barcelona. His time at Liverpool extended into the 2001-2 season before concluding. The overall period at Anfield was one where glimpses of his best qualities were visible without the sustained consistency that his Ajax years had established. The context of his career by this point, the injuries at Barcelona, the limited playing time at Liverpool, the gradual accumulation of physical challenge, was one that required patience and adaptability. There is a quality that the best players of a certain profile possess that does not disappear with age or with injury interruptions, a quality of understanding the game so deeply that the reading of situations remains accurate even when the physical ability to execute perfectly is diminished. Litmanen had this quality. When he was on the pitch, even in his later career, the intelligence of his movement and his decision-making remained evident. This is something that coaches and teammates notice. A player who has played the game at the highest level for many years accumulates a kind of football knowledge that is not reducible to physical attributes. They know where to be. They know when to move. They know how to create space through anticipation rather than through running. These things persist. After Liverpool, Litmanen returned to Ajax. This second period at the club was a return to a familiar environment, to a system and a culture that he knew deeply from his first years there. The Ajax of the early to mid-2000s was not the same team that had won the Champions League in 1995, but the club's philosophy and its approach to football remained consistent. The return gave Litmanen the stability of a known environment and the opportunity to contribute in a place that valued and understood his qualities. His performances for Ajax in this second period were a reminder of what he had been, even if the years and the injury history meant he was operating somewhat differently than in his peak. He remained a meaningful contributor, a player who brought quality and intelligence to the team in a way that younger players in the squad could also learn from, simply by playing alongside him. The Finland national team continued to be a constant across all of these club movements. Qualifying campaigns came and went across the years, and Litmanen was there for most of them, committed to the national shirt with the same seriousness he brought to his club football. The qualification groups changed, the opponents changed, but the fundamental situation remained the same. Finland were competitive without being quite strong enough to secure a place in a major tournament. Litmanen's dedication to the national team across the length of his career was genuine. He could have chosen to limit his international appearances to protect his fitness for club football, particularly during the periods when injuries were a recurring problem. Instead, he continued to represent Finland for as long as he was able, understanding his responsibility as the best player the country had produced and his importance to the national team's chances of performing well. International football for a player in this position involves a great deal of travel. Qualifying matches are spread across Europe, in stadiums large and small, in countries with different climates and different playing surfaces. The weeks with the national team, away from the club environment, in a different rhythm and a different squad dynamic, are part of the professional reality that international players navigate throughout their careers. For Litmanen, these weeks represented a genuine commitment to something beyond his club career. They were not always straightforward or comfortable, but they were part of who he was as a footballer. The later years of his club career, after the second Ajax period, took Litmanen through a further set of clubs. He played for Hansa Rostock in Germany, for Malmö in Sweden, and returned to Lahti and Rapus at the end of his career, completing a circle that brought him back to where he had begun. Hansa Rostock is a club from the port city of Rostock on Germany's Baltic Sea coast. The Bundesliga is one of the strongest domestic leagues in Europe, and appearing there, even in the later stages of a career, was another environment in which Litmanen demonstrated that his technical qualities remained present and valuable. Malmö in Sweden offered a more familiar Nordic environment. The Swedish Allsvenskan is a league with a broadly similar structure to the Finnish league in terms of its summer schedule and its relationship to Scandinavian climate and culture. Playing in Sweden was in some ways a return to the kind of football environment Litmanen had known in his early career. Professional and serious, but operating at a different scale from Ajax or Barcelona or Liverpool. The return to Lahti and Rapus at the very end of his career was something quieter and more personal, playing for the club where his football life had begun, in the city where he had grown up, completing the journey at its starting point. These are the kinds of endings that carry a natural completeness, not dramatic or announced, just quietly right. He retired from professional football in 2012. He was 41 years old. The career had begun in Lahti in the 1980s and had taken him through Finland, the Netherlands, Spain, England, Germany, Sweden, and back to Finland again. Along the way, he had won the Champions League, multiple Dutch league titles, been recognized as one of the best players in Europe in his peak years, and played more than 100 times for his country. Retirement from professional football brings a significant change in daily structure. The training, the matches, the travel, the preparation and recovery that fill a footballer's working week, all of this stops. The rhythm that has organized life for 20 or more years is suddenly absent. Players approach this transition in different ways. Some find it easy. Others find the adjustment more challenging. Litmanen moved into life after football with the quiet manner that had characterized his playing career. He did not disappear from football entirely. He remained connected to the game through various capacities, including involvement with Finnish football development and occasional appearances in the public conversations about the game in Finland. Finland as a country continued its football development after Litmanen's retirement. The national team, which had spent so many years trying and failing to qualify for a major tournament during his playing career, eventually achieved something remarkable. Finland qualified for UEFA Euro 2020, their first ever appearance at a major international tournament. The qualification came after Litmanen had retired, representing a breakthrough for Finnish football that he had worked toward across his entire international career, without personally experiencing it. His legacy in Finnish football is specific and significant. There is no other Finnish footballer who has operated at the level Litmanen reached. No other Finnish player has won the Champions League. No other Finnish player has been the central creative force of a European title-winning team. No other Finnish player has been recognized individually as among the best in Europe in a given season. This means that for Finnish football culture, Litmanen occupies a unique position. He is the reference point, the standard against which other Finnish players are measured. The example that demonstrates what is possible from Finnish football when the circumstances align and a talent of sufficient quality emerges and finds the right environment to develop. For the generation of Finnish players who came after him, Litmanen's career was evidence. Evidence that a player from Finland could reach the highest level of European club football, that the country's climate and its modest domestic league were not absolute barriers, that the work done on cold training fields through the long Finnish winter could lead somewhere significant if the talent and the commitment were both present. Ajax as a club remained part of the story long after the 1995 Champions League season. The connection between Litmanen and the club was lasting, as the second period there confirmed. Amsterdam and the Ajax culture were places where his football had found its fullest expression, where Van Gaal's system and the quality of the squad around him had created the conditions in which his abilities could operate at their highest level. The 1994-95 Ajax team is remembered in football as one of the great club teams of the modern era. When discussions arise about the most impressive club performances in Champions League history, that Ajax team appears regularly. The combination of youth and quality, the clarity of the playing philosophy, the results achieved against very strong opposition, all of it adds up to a team that left a lasting impression on those who watched and studied football closely. Litmanen's role in that team was central. He was not a peripheral figure who benefited from the quality around him. He was the player who made the decisive difference in attacking situations, who provided the creativity and the technical quality that the team needed to convert its possession and its organization into goals and into victories. Let the images of that era settle gently. The Amsterdam Arena on a European night, the lights on the pitch, the crowd filling the tiers. The Ajax players in their white shirts with the red and black central stripe, moving through the patterns that Van Gaal had organized across months of training. And among them, a Finnish player moving quietly into space, receiving the ball, turning, finding the pass that opened the game. That is the image that captures something essential about Litmanen. Not the obvious, not the spectacular, but the quiet and precise. The movement that happened before the ball arrived, the decision that was already made, the execution that looked simple because everything leading up to it had been done correctly. Football at its most intelligent is like this. The best moments in the game often appear effortless from a distance. What they actually require is a kind of constant low-level processing, reading the positions of teammates and opponents, anticipating how the situation will develop, positioning the body correctly so that when the ball arrives, the next action is already available. Litmanen did this better than almost anyone of his generation. Quiet Finnish mornings. The light coming in pale through birch trees. The sound of boots on frost-hardened ground during an autumn training session. The breath visible in the cold air. The particular silence of a Finnish landscape. A silence that is different from the silence of other countries. Deeper and more settled. Litmanen grew up in this environment. The coldness and the quiet were not obstacles to his development, but the background against which it happened. He learned to love football in a country where the conditions for football were sometimes difficult, which perhaps gave him a particular kind of commitment to the game and a particular appreciation of the opportunities that eventually opened up. The journey from those cold mornings in Lahti to the warm training grounds in Barcelona and the grey Amsterdam autumn light was a long one. It required talent, certainly, but it also required patience and consistency and a willingness to keep developing through each new environment, each new challenge, each period when things were not going as hoped. The injury challenges that marked significant portions of his career at Barcelona and in the later years were real difficulties. They interrupted the smooth arc of what might otherwise have been a continuously high-level performing career at the biggest clubs. Barcelona represented a moment when everything aligned. The right coach, the right club, the right timing, and the injuries arrived to disrupt it before it could fully develop. This is simply part of the record. It does not diminish what was achieved in the years before and after. The Champions League in 1995 stands regardless. The years at Ajax and the recognition they brought stand regardless. The more than 100 caps for Finland and the captaincy stand regardless. The injuries are part of the story, but they do not define it. What the injury periods perhaps gave Litmanen was a deepened understanding of the game's fragility and of the value of the playing time that was available. Players who have experienced long absences through injury often speak about returning with a different appreciation of the simple act of being on the pitch and playing. The ordinary matches, the routine league games that feel unremarkable, when you are fit and available for every one of them, take on a different quality when you have spent months unable to play and have missed them. There is a dimension to Litmanen's career that goes beyond the individual achievement and connects to the broader story of Finnish football. He was playing during a period when Finland was still finding its place in European football, when the country's reputation in the game was limited, and the expectation of Finnish players reaching the highest level was not something that existed in any established way. His success at Ajax changed that, at least in terms of what was understood to be possible. When a Finnish player wins the Champions League and is named the best player in European club competition in a given year, it changes the conversation about what Finnish football can produce. It does not automatically create a pipeline of similar talent, because talent of that kind is rare, regardless of country. But it changes the ceiling of what is considered achievable. In that sense, Litmanen's career was not just his own story. It was a piece of Finnish football's story, a demonstration that the gap between the modest domestic league and the very top of European club football could be crossed by a player with the right qualities and the right opportunities. He settled back in Finland after his retirement, the country he had left as a young man to pursue his career in Europe, remained his home in the deepest sense, the place where his family was, where his roots were, where the football story had begun. Returning there was natural. His involvement in Finnish football after retirement has included work connected to the development of the game in the country. This is a natural role for someone of his stature in Finnish football. The experience and the knowledge accumulated across a career that went to the very top of European football is genuinely valuable to the people working to develop Finnish players and Finnish football culture. The things he learned at Ajax, in Van Gaal's system, in competition with and against the best players in Europe, are things that can be passed on in various ways. Football knowledge transfers between generations through exactly these kinds of connections. The coach who works with a young player carries within their coaching the things they learned from their own coaches and teammates and opponents. The former player who speaks to a youth academy group carries within those conversations the accumulated experience of a professional career. The chain of influence is long and often invisible, but it is real. The Ajax of the mid-1990s lives in football memory as a team that played the game correctly, with intelligence and technical quality, and a coherent collective purpose. The players from that team went on to have careers that spread across European football to many different clubs and countries, and many of them carried something of the Ajax philosophy with them into those later environments. Litmanen was one of those players. His experience in Van Gaal's system, his years of operating as the creative centre of one of Europe's best teams, gave him a deep understanding of what technically excellent, intelligent, collective football looked like from the inside. That understanding is not something that disappears after the playing stops. The 1995 Champions League final in Vienna, Ajax against AC Milan, a Dutch club built on youth and philosophy and technical clarity, winning the most important match in European club football. Litmanen on that pitch, part of that team, contributing to that victory. It is a moment fixed in the permanent record of the game, unchanged by everything that came after. It is late now, or very early, and the story has moved through all its stages, from Lahti and the cold training fields of Finnish youth football, through HJK and the first steps into professional football, across to Amsterdam and the Ajax years and the Champions League, onward to Barcelona and Liverpool and the later clubs, and back finally to Finland where it all began. The story of Jari Litmanen is a story of consistent quality maintained across a long career. It is a story of the highest achievement in European club football, balanced against the humbler context of representing a modest national team with full commitment across many years. It is a story of injury and its frustrations, of a career that might have been even more decorated at the biggest clubs if the body had cooperated more consistently. And it is a story of football intelligence, a quality that does not appear clearly in any statistics, but that everyone who watched him closely recognized and described in the same terms. The football fields of Lahti in summer, the grass green and firm in the long northern evening light, a young player with his father's connection to the game already inside him, learning the sport that would carry him across Europe and back again, not knowing yet how far the journey would go, just playing, because playing was what he loved. That is always where these stories begin, in the simple act of playing, before the contracts and the transfers and the Champions League nights and the injury rehabilitation and all the complexity of a professional career. Just the game itself, on a field somewhere in the world, played by someone who will eventually take it further than anyone around them can yet imagine. Let that image rest quietly. The field, the ball, the evening light in Finland, pale and extended into the night. A beginning that contained within it, invisibly, everything that came after. Your breathing has slowed. The room is still. The night outside is doing what it does, moving gently toward morning in its own unhurried way. There is nothing left in this story that asks anything of you. It has followed its path from beginning to end, quietly and without urgency. A child in Lahti, with a football and a father who had played the game. A young man finding his way through Finnish football toward Amsterdam and something larger. A player at the centre of one of the great club teams in European football history. A captain leading his country with consistency and commitment across many years and many qualifying campaigns. A career completed, returned to its starting place, its knowledge and its example left behind for those who came after. All of that is settled now. All of it quiet. Let your body rest fully where it is. Let the thoughts drift without grabbing at them. The darkness is soft, and there is nothing in it that asks anything of you. Sleep now. Rest well.